Welcome to the Kratom Advocacy Podcast. My name is Lawrence, and today we're having a conversation with Ryan Niddel, who is the CEO of the arguably most popular and certainly most visible Kratom company in the United States of America right now. Ryan, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Lawrence, I've been a fan and watching from afar, so I feel an honor and a privilege to get to spend some time with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, you joined the ranks of my mother and wife, I think my wife and my fans, so I'm not sure what to count beyond that, but thank you very much. I'm honored to hear that.
Of course.
Okay, so maybe getting to your beginnings, your first experience with Kratom, can you describe that? And from there, did you develop an emotional kind of relationship with it first, or did you say to yourself, "Hey, I can sell this"?
Yeah, Lawrence, that's a really good question. So my entry point into Kratom is perhaps a little different than most, where I had grown and sold a CBD company, gosh, in 2000, started in 16, sold in 2018. I had never heard of Kratom. That led me to eventually consulting for MIT45, which back then was called SSV LLC. And for the first 18 months, Lawrence, I love the art and science of business first and foremost. And so much of my focus was on the business optimization side of things, especially, right, you go back 2019 when I came on board, just getting on the backside of some of the, FDA and DEA issues that have went on in our industry prior to that moment in time, and people having a general sense of unrest if the industry was going to make it. It really allowed me to help focus on the business optimization to start with. And so I didn't have my first experience with Kratom until, gosh, maybe mid 2021, and right was tried our MIT45 Gold product, tried a very small amount of it. I'm a big believer in less is best with Kratom across the board. It's always a minimum possible consumption to begin with, and tried just a capful. And to start with, said, boy, this is one of the most unique tasting products I've ever had before. Unique being, for me, unpleasant, right? I'm not bashful with it. Our product doesn't have any flavor additives to it, so it's the truest essence of what's in the plant. And thought, okay, the taste is pretty strange, right? Not enjoyable to me. But then I sat with the perceived effects, and for me, with our MIT45 Gold product, it was really a sense of almost a hybrid between this really great euphoric feeling, while still having plenty of mental focus, plenty of clear, clean energy. It just was this really enjoyable moment for me, and thought, okay, it's not so enjoyable that I'm craving it going forward. And so the emotional attachment to it wasn't high for me, other than the fact of saying, okay, I see what the buzz could be about, if you will, both metaphorically and physically in the body, that there is a unique experience when you try Kratom. And again, I don't believe Kratom is for everyone. I think that there's a lot of science that we've been studying to show, right, different potential use cases of both things that are good and things maybe not so good to consider inside the Kratom landscape. And so I share that, Lawrence, because from really in that 2021 range until very recently, we've been really focused on optimizing for what we believe we'll call it the best serving size would be. And the best serving size being driving it to the novice consumer, as perhaps the FDA would qualify it, or even just how you and I qualify. I was a novice consumer in 2021. I didn't really know about the plant. The science wasn't, what it is now. It was, okay, I know less is best, but how much is a little? How much is a lot? How much, what does that even mean? And that's led us to a path where our new products, and all of our products going forward have metered servings on them now, right? We believe that 25 milligrams of active alkaloid is a good entry point for a novice consumer, that with a dropper to very clearly understand what they're consuming, that when taken responsibly, it will break some of the stigma that could exist around Kratom with, again, like you said, how is someone connecting to the plant? How are they feeling on it? Are they building an emotional bond to it that's hard for them to disassociate from? And we truly believe, with a bunch of scientific research, that 25 milligrams is a really appropriate amount of consumption for a one-time use, and to not exceed, 4 servings over a 24-hour period, spaced at least 6 hours apart. Like our goal, and my goal to me inside of the Kratom landscape, is responsible consumption and informed consent. I think that when consumers know more and more and more, and they're not being guided towards something, it's more of like, here's all the information we know right now. obviously, you know better than anybody in our industry, the science is emerging almost weekly at this point, right? So it's like what we think is true and valid now might be proven untrue and unvalid in the future. And so being rigid enough to know that we have to pay attention to the science, but flexible enough to know that the science might show different things in the future is part of what we've really built our company into over the past, 18 to 24 months. Long-winded diatribe to say, my first experience with Kratom was unique, enjoyable. It's something that I use a handful of our products throughout the course of a month, and I use them primarily for energy, focus, mental clarity. I go for that versus potentially an energy drink or something like that. Every once in a while, I'll still sneak in a cup of coffee or the occasional Monster or Red Bull. But I think the effects to me, again, you get it, are just, for me personally, are much different with specific extracts for us that provide specific results.
So you mentioned that you're trying to fight more is more, less is more. How does that reflect on your packaging? Because I noticed that we make it stronger is better, and stronger is better. That's typically the approach that gets you a dependency, or perhaps even addiction. How do you fight that? And would you be okay with putting, similar to, I guess it's akin to cigarettes, nicotine is an addictive chemical. Maybe not for metragenine, but maybe for something like 7-OH. Would you consider putting this is an addictive, could be an addictive chemical, potentially addictive? Would you be open to that?
So I love the question, and I'm really excited for this moment in time, because I have to start with the fact of, as I look at our past products, we've got a series of products that we at one point were chasing stronger and stronger products. It wasn't our finest hour, but the market was showing that there was an opportunity there, and we went towards that opportunity. And that would have been 2019, perhaps, right? So we haven't went through a major update since 2019, with the exception of a product called Ultramit, which does have a metered serving on it, right? It does have a dropper to meter it out. And so my thoughts are on the stronger and stronger products. I don't inherently have an issue with products having different amounts of active alkaloids. I think to start with, I believe, at least inside of MIT45, and this is so challenging because none of what I'm sharing is to attack any of our counterparts. I think we're all trying to figure this out together.
Of course.
But I look at it that, to start with, I like to define what is Kratom. Like the FDA would say, what is your it? Well, I look at Kratom very specifically. If we were to go to Indonesia and Thailand and we were to take leaves off a tree, that is a Kratom leaf. We know what it is, and we could study what that is, and the alkaloid profile, the subalkaloid profile, the metabolite profile, and that's almost always inside of a range, right? I mean, it's just over a long enough sample study, and you might have different ranges from white vein to green vein to red vein, but it's still a range, and it's a very well-known range. And so I look at, Lawrence, whether it's an extract or whether it's plant matter, I think that as long as things stay inside the natural alkaloid range and the natural alkaloid density, that we could define that as Kratom. So in my world, a 7-hydroxy isolate, I can't say if that's good or bad right now because we haven't done any level of studying on that because it's not our business model. But I can't say that it's Kratom because it's a component of Kratom. To me, it's like saying, well, gosh, CBD is cannabis. Well, no, it's not. But then we could even take a step further and say, well, is Delta 8 cannabis? Is Delta 8 CBD? Is Delta 8 its own thing? And so I think there's some rules of engagement that are existing in other markets that we should pay attention to, right? Again, just the cannabis, CBD, Delta 8, Delta 9, THCA type of market, and how each of those have different definitions and fall under different types of regulation from time to time. I think that's a good starting point. But as I look at that, Lawrence, what we're doing is all of our new packaging is going into a box. The box has very clear warnings on it across the board. We can't say that this is addictive because, to me, currently the science, when you look at the truest definition of the scientific definition of addiction, Kratom to me doesn't check the boxes for addiction. Kratom does check the boxes for habit forming, right? But I could also make the argument that caffeine is habit forming and the internet is habit forming and all types of things are habit forming. And it's not to downplay the significance at all. I think it's, again, we need to be responsible with how we represent any product, let alone something that could, over a long period of time, have any number of effects on a human being. And so what we're doing is all of our boxes certainly have very clear warnings on them. All right, this could be habit forming. We're going 21 and over as a blanket statement across the board. Inside the box, we're doing a contraindication warning that is there we go. get that to zoom in. We're doing a contraindication warning that you can fold out, almost like inside of a Tylenol type of, or ibuprofen, where it's a multi-page with every study, all the research we can find, QR codes for updated information that sits on top of the bottle. So you're physically going to have to remove that and look at that before you can pull our bottle out of the package, which then has a child-proof, tamper-resistant lid that has a dropper on the lid itself. So you're gonna have to go through 2 more, passes to get access to a product, all of which to really deter overconsumption. It's to deter stronger and stronger products. It's to acknowledge the fact that all the science hasn't caught up yet to what this product really is and how it works. The call I was just on before hopping on our interview was with our head of scientific research. And that head of scientific research was very, very clear on, and it is a challenge to get all the alkaloids, subalkaloids, metabolites all the way down through this plant to really do quality safety studies at scale. Like, it's hard enough just to get the top 5 or top 6 alkaloids, let alone everything you're asking us to do. I said, I could appreciate that. We still have to figure it out, right? And that's one of those things, Lawrence, that to me, how I view the industry. Again, if someone's unfamiliar with the Kratom landscape, the way I view it is 2016, 2017, the industry was almost eradicated for all the reasons that, maybe it made sense at that moment in time. I wasn't in the industry, so right, it's all hearsay, but across the board from then you have this 2 or 3 year window where why would any logical business owner invest in scientific research into an industry that you're waiting to be eradicated overnight? It's like you're just throwing money into the void. And then I think a lot of us woke up and said, holy cow, we've made it to 2020, 2021. We have the industry is growing as a whole. Our businesses are growing, maybe a little more revenue, maybe a little more profitability. We probably should start investing in some of these things. And the majority of us, I don't think, had any idea to run really scientific quality studies that you're looking at a 12, 18, sometimes 24-month runway just to get really solid data from really reputable sources. And so I share that with something like the 7-hydroxy that's coming out now, which I'm not a fan of personally. I think that from how I was introduced into the market,
My next question.
It was told to me back then that 7-hydroxy might have had the highest propensity for opioid receptor bonding. Now, I don't know if that was true or not. That's what it was told to me. It was very anecdotal. We hadn't ran studies on this. But in seeing that and my one-time experience, I bought a product, right? Won't define the product because it doesn't really much matter, but I bought a 7-OH product just to say, man, what's all the buzz for this? What's all the noise? And in trying a capsule of this product, it was an experience that I don't think is beneficial for the average person to be able to have as they're outside of a convenience store or gas station. I think that it's something that, no different to me than I don't think drinking a bottle of Everclear in the parking lot is good either. It doesn't mean it's not able to be responsibly used. It's just not something that I think you should be able to go to your car and crack open. But it was a one-time use. And again, the science hasn't caught up to it. But the science is going to take a long time, which is the other fun part of this that I don't think that most people have much of an idea on. And I'm sorry about how this keeps unzooming. I don't think that the general populace has any idea of how challenging it is to get the good quality research, right? So while we as an industry might be fighting back and forth on 7-OH, and is it good, is it bad, should it be banned, should it not be banned, we're too late for all that. You can't push this genie back in the bottle. And that's the part, to me, it's to acknowledge the fact of this exists. Instead of fighting it, let's fight the definition of Kratom versus not. Let's allow 7-OH to fall under its own regulatory guidelines. Let's have those people that are manufacturing and making that product, let's have them be responsible to show up the way that we show up as a Kratom industry. Let's just not confuse the novice consumer that 7-OH is not Kratom. It's a component. It's an alkaloid. It is not Kratom in its entirety, would be my stance. I'll get off my soapbox, right? I'm not anti 7-OH. I don't think it's good for the average consumer stopping at a gas station or smoke shop and popping a pill in their car. But that gets into a whole nother conversation, Lawrence, where we have to acknowledge that 7-OH is a percentage of every Kratom product in the market. So which one is it? Is Is it the fact that all 7-OH is bad and we should filter out 7-OH? I mean, we try to, in our manufacturing process, drive that as low as possible. We've got a very low tolerance for 7-hydroxy by weight, where we certainly disregard a lot of plant material that it comes in a little too high. That's our choice. I'm not saying it's best. It's just, I think that I don't ever want to be responsible for someone's demise, right? I think that when we show up, making money is a great thing, right? It allows us to make a great impact on a lot of people's lives. It allows us to employ at MIT45 130 to 140 full-time employees. It allows us to have charitable contributions. It allows us to have a ripple effect into the world, but not at the expense of someone that could be harmed by consuming a product. And I think that's my overall plight right now is, man, some of these products that people are taking to market, can you really sleep at night knowing that you're not harming people? Like really believing like, oh no, this is just not harming anybody. Or are you deceiving yourself into that? And I don't know, right? We all have our own cross to bear, if you will. But for MIT45, we are not a 7-OH manufacturing business, nor will we ever be. Although we have seen products in the market that are using our branding to suggest the fact that we are manufacturing something like that. We absolutely unequivocally aren't and will not.
And a lot of Kratom's opponents are using the public's conflation of 7-OH with Kratom to kind of drive a wedge into the community and break them up. I've noticed that. Who are like the main, I don't want to give them too much airtime, but who are some opponents that you encounter again and again, or misconceptions again and again that you encounter that maybe imperil Kratom's legality?
Yeah, Lawrence, I think, right, we're just on the backside of the Champs trade show, right? And Champs trade show is kind of the smoke shop industry's trade show. It's in Vegas. And you walk through Champs halls and you see, we'll say 30 or 40 booths that are selling some variant of a 7-hydroxy product. And when you walk into the booth and you just ask them for information, right? Now, these are distributors, these are manufacturers. This is a smorgasbord of potential entry points. The majority of people are just calling it Kratom. And so I say, okay, well, that's interesting, but it's a small sample size. So then we start looking at our stores that we interact with directly, right? The smoke shops and convenience stores. And we ask them what's going on. And they're saying very directly, the normal person, the average person behind the counter, oh, this is just the best-selling Kratom product we have. And they're meaning 7-hydroxy. And so it's who's the advocate for it right now? It's everybody, because it's not clear. And if I was an early entry point into the 7-OH space, I would absolutely piggyback on the backside of Kratom and try to create confusion. I mean, from a marketing standpoint, I'm not anti that. I don't know that I'd be proud of it, but you have Kratom that is sold obviously in what are the numbers? Somewhere between 1.5 million and 2.5 million consumers throughout the US per annum. It's not a cult-like following, but people certainly know what Kratom is in certain parts of the world. And so if I was to create a new product, I'd want to piggyback on the backside of that to see if I could get more people to try our new product, not MIT45, if I was a 7-OH, creator or provider. And so I get where they're coming from. I will say we as an industry have had a conversation with, I remember 2 specific people I was on the phone with as part of the American Kratom Association, right? We're having these conversations and just asking these manufacturers, look, instead of trying to push you out, can we at least have you not put that this isn't, change your packaging so it doesn't overtly say this is Kratom. And 2 out of the 2 were very amiable to taking Kratom off of the packaging, which, right, I believe in free market economy. I want there to be competition. I want there to be innovation in the marketplace. I think we need that as a society, while simultaneously also saying, man, it'd be great if we could figure out how to innovate scientific research as well, which is really where, to me, the biggest issues are. And what I mean by that is to go through the process of an IRB, to go through the process of all the steps that are required to do a real clinical trial on a product. Currently, I don't know a way you could get it done in shorter than a year. And that's all the money in the world. All the every light you pull up to is green. I don't know how it gets done in less than a year. And the challenge is we can innovate and make new products so much quicker than a year that there's no way to really do that in a way that is scalable, right? Like right now you could take any one of the main 5 metabolites, right, or alkaloids inside of a kratom product. All of us know how to separate every one of those out, right? You want any one of a 7-hydroxy, a mitragine specific isolate, you want a pyanthine, you want anything that you like. The science has been around for a long time. It's not challenging to do that. The challenge is it safe? Is it beneficial? What are the long-term effects? What are the short-term effects? Where I think when we can figure out ways to get more scientifically advanced to shorten down the study time, then we start to have a lot of unlocks as an industry, and I'll go as far as a society, because I don't think that anybody wakes up and says, I want to do harm to people, right? I don't believe that someone says, I'm so greedy, I want to harm 1 million people by selling this product, at least in the worlds that you and I play in, right? We could get into harsh drugs and things like that. Perhaps that is the case. But I think that with advancements there, I think it's different. And admittedly, Lawrence, I think the FDA has the most challenging job of any of us. And that's such a polarizing thing to say to me in our space, where it seems like at times we think the FDA is out to get us all. I think that when you look at the FDA and the onus of responsibility that they have to protect a novice consumer at large, they are under-resourced. That's a very small department. If you look at Dr. Welsh and her department, they are responsible for all dietary supplements, all new food ingredients, all food overall. And so you have one office with somewhere between 5 and 12 people, depending on, size and scale, that is responsible for ensuring everything that we put in our mouth that's not pharmaceutical is safe for consumption. Like, how in the world, like, how do you even determine how to get through that process versus saying, okay, to start with, anybody can put something into commerce. And then once you get enough negative events that are stated, then we'll start to do research. And we as an industry haven't done ourselves any favors. Right. I'm raising my hand of being guilty with some of our products that are stronger, that again, we're changing the packaging, we're changing the metered servings, where it's saying, look, if we just would take best practices from pharmaceuticals, from food, from THC and CBD, we would bond together, we'd create a standardized serving, we'd make it so there were guardrails around the product so it wasn't easily accessible by any minor. We would make sure every product was manufactured in a GMP compliant facility or better. We would consistently all be funding a level of research. We'd have a consumer advocacy group and we'd have an industry advocacy group. They'd be different. And you'd be watching out for ourselves. You'd have a third party that actually went around and audited the manufacturing facilities to ensure the fact it's not just a checkbox, that you really go in almost expose style, and you'd actually have the ability to work side by side to help manufacturing facilities increase their quality of output. But we're not there yet as an industry. And it's like, it still feels like at times around many of my counterparts that they're just waiting for the next shoe to drop. They're waiting for the industry to be eradicated. They're waiting for the next, monster in the closet to jump out, versus saying, hold on, guys, what if we just bond together? It's not about who's right or wrong. Like, I don't know if our 25 milligrams of active alkaloid is the right serving size or not. I don't have any idea. But I know we have to start somewhere. We have to put a flag in the ground as an industry and say, okay, we think this is reasonable. Here's the data that shows it. Here's the science that shows it. Where when we announce that to our counterparts, Lawrence, there was a fair amount of I'll say friction, maybe even consternation that number was far too low. And the number was far too low because they said that some people wouldn't have an experience with Kratom at that low of a consumption, that they might not feel the effects. And I said, well, let's take that feeling of effect. Let's take the, potentially 60-year-old individual walking around. In my mind, it's always Whole Foods on a Saturday. They find a product. I know we're not in Whole Foods yet, but that's the end goal for all of us. They find that product. They take it home on a Saturday. They open up and they take a serving of whatever we deem a serving to be. Would you give your 60-year-old, wife, husband, grandmother, aunt, uncle, would you give them 50 milligrams to start with as the first time they've ever been introduced to Kratom? And almost unilaterally at that moment, people said no. I said, well, we have to stop chasing the smoke shop world. I'm not against the smoke shop world. The counterculture world is how we've been created. But I think the counterculture world, Lawrence, is a great place to learn from. I think the counterculture world where our products are typically sold is a great place to understand that consumers will end up doing what consumers want to do. And I believe that go ahead, Lawrence, please. I
Yeah,
keep interrupting you.
no, it's okay. Looking at the majority of the consumers in that grouping, it's mostly younger people, and younger people typically are searching for greater intensity of experience. So my concern with that perspective would be that people go off and are doing their own shit anyway, and they're pumping it up and making it more powerful. And you have the bulk of your consumers just ignoring people doing the right thing and taking that.
Yeah, and we believe it, at least inside of MIT45, to be much the same way, that a consumer that has already purchased our product from a smoke shop, they're not going to alter their consumption habits because we put a metered serving on it, because we put a childproof lid on it. They've become accustomed to whatever that means to them. They're going to use it as they have previously used it. But if we want to start indexing towards the new demographic that we believe, like, it's been very interesting for us to see our e-com business really take some massive shifts, where our e-com business, Lawrence, is much more of the late 40s, early 50s. We'll go really late 30s to early 50s, upwardly mobile, tons of disposable income, white male that's interested in health, fitness, longevity, travel, day trading. I mean, I can go through all the socioeconomic and psychographic propensities that these individuals have. And it's saying, holy cow, these are people that are looking for natural alternatives to something, right? Who knows what they're looking for right now? I won't make any claims, but they're looking for a natural alternative to something, and they're finding Kratom, but don't feel comfortable currently going into a smoke shop, a gas station, convenience store to buy the product. And I get it, right? I'm a 40-year-old man that I think is somewhat upwardly mobile. I'm not taking, my car after work and driving to a smoke shop. I am sitting in my office buying things that I want to have show up at the office or at the home. I don't think I'm unique in that situation, but I think we as an industry should really focus on where do we want to be in 5 or 10 years from now. And yes, there could be a little change where, again, it is way more expensive for us to go from a single bottle with no metered serving into a bottle in a box with a contraindication warning and a dropper. I mean, our cost of goods is going through the roof as we do this. But in doing it, it's just, we just have this internal knowing that it's the right thing to do. It's protecting someone that has never seen Kratom before. Because the people that know Kratom right now, they're going to use it the way they use it, right? I mean, and I'm not saying how they're using it is good or bad. I say internally for us, I think the people that go to a smoke shop are incredible people. But I think that they typically are going to a smoke shop or, alternative shop to escape a sense of reality. And what I want to start chasing is people are looking to augment their reality or enhance their reality. And I think it's a very different way to approach the plant. I think it's a very different way to approach the marketplace. I think that has us being innovative versus stronger. I think it's just a different way to view things. But right, time will tell if I'm right or wrong, right? We're definitely gambling pretty big here with, Lawrence, I'll show you our new packaging. I mean, it is
Insider information. I thought it was nail polish at first. Yeah, pretty cool. Wow.
Right. So it's physically droppers, and this affixes on, and it's completely childproof. And same thing with our gold standard product, right? MIT45.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a slightly different logo. It's a slightly different feel. Yeah, they're painted bottles. It is more cumbersome. It is more expensive. It is more laborious. It is more of everything, but it's also, we believe, more of what the novice consumer deserves to have access to is more information that is not only pro Kratom, which I think is another slippery slope for us. I mean, look at the podcast I get to be a guest on, the Kratom advocacy side.
Well, thank you.
I love that, but I think it's equal for us to say, what are all the people that maybe shouldn't take Kratom? I don't think Kratom is for everyone. And I think sometimes that doesn't get tossed around enough, right? We've got scientific research that shows if your C-reactive protein is not fully expressed, you have somewhere between a 80 and 90% higher possibility of establishing a sense of habit-forming behaviors associated with Kratom. Now, it's not just Kratom, it's everything across the board. And then people are like, well, how do you know if your C-reactive protein is fully expressed or not? Well, you don't until you take a DNA assessment. Well, how in the world do you combine those two where you walk into a convenience store or a smoke shop, you have to spit in a tube, you have to wait 4 or 5 days to get the test results back. Like, but those are some of the things that we're innovating internally, where I'm in negotiations right now to, I think it's appropriate to share with you. We've been in negotiations to buy a company that would allow us a patented way of assessing DNA to know exactly that. That would be almost
Wow.
instantaneous response. That when you were to, spit into a tube, it would change the color of the liquid based on if you have the C-reactive protein expression or not. Because I truly believe that once you know better about something, you have an onus of responsibility to do better. And seeing that research that came out, it just doesn't make sense to me to not bring that to the forefront. Much like I keep trying to bring myself to the forefront of the focus on the camera.
I was thinking that line as well. We're on the same back. So that's really fascinating, and thank you for sharing that, both your packaging and this DNA company. That's really valuable information. And I wanted to maybe pivot for a moment. So you present as like an affable, highly visible, highly extroverted CEO. Is that natural to your personality? Is some amount of that, not to put it, not a negative connotation, but maybe choreographed, or did you have to cultivate that? Are you really more introverted than you would seem, or basically does the position of CEO conflict sometimes with your personality, and if so, how so?
What a brilliant question. Thank you for asking it, Lawrence. I think that on my side, my background would have been post college. It was sales, and so I had the ability to turn it on and turn it off, if you will, right? To be that extroverted, jovial, perhaps individual that could be the center of attention or feels very comfortable in a crowd. But if I'm left to my own devices, I'm sitting in my office just off camera. I've got a little chair and I'm reading the books in the back, and I'm not talking to anybody, right? Like I'm in my own head and in my own space quite often. And so one of the things when I came on board with MIT45, I had asked Sean Brady and Dalton Locke, the founders of MIT45, the founding partners, still part of the company. Guys, why aren't you out there? Why aren't you sharing? Like, you're so passionate about the plant, you're so passionate about what we do, but yet when I research you, I can't find anything about you. I can't find anything about the company. And I didn't realize all the issues that had went on in 16 and 17 and maybe even 18 as an industry at that point. And so I can understand why, there might have been a sense of not maybe wanting to be way out in the forefront. Where for myself, as I looked around, I'm so sorry about this incredibly poor camera.
I'm happy just to have you on the show. It's totally cool.
I appreciate that. So in saying that, I said, guys, I'm going to, if you're okay with it, I'd like to start getting out in the forefront of the Kratom landscape. And not because I wish to be the only one to be in the forefront, but as I look at our counterparts, at least at that moment in time, there wasn't really an outward facing persona that I saw. There wasn't somebody that was, you think of a counterculture brand, at least I did, a counterculture brand, like, who's the owner of this? And when you can't find them online, it allows your mind to start racing to all the worst, the worst possible stories. At least it did for me. And saying, well, hold on a second. We're very proud of what we do. We're proud of how we do it. We're proud of our compliance and our regulatory stances. I don't wish to hide from anything. I have no problem being on camera, whether blurry or clear, and sharing my thoughts on Kratom, with being humble enough to say they're going to change, right? I think that's the other thing, Lawrence. So much of my life has been really focused around challenging what I believe to be true. And I think that is going to be necessary as we continue down this landscape in our industry, because the science that we thought was true and valid perhaps 2 years ago, we're starting to disprove now in different forms and fashions. Or we're starting to realize it was a partial truth versus a whole truth, right? So I share all that because the cultivated image, if you will, right? My background, I owned a custom clothing company, so I happen to have a whole bunch of suits that I just feel more comfortable in, right? So some of the custom clothing and the way I present myself is because stuff off the rack doesn't fit me all that well. I have a decent size stature to me. Yeah, so right, I wear the stuff that I've made for myself over the course of my life, and certainly appreciate being able to have a good conversation and be maybe perhaps slightly articulate with things. But across the board, I'm probably somewhere in between a forced extrovert or somebody that's comfortable being extroverted. But when left to my own devices, I'm going to be a lone ranger in the corner, not saying much to anybody, reading, thinking, taking notes. unless I'm asked to respond to something.
Cool. All right. And I hear y'all are sponsoring some bare knuckle fighting tournaments. That's pretty cool. What's the reasoning behind that? Is that applicable to your image, or are you trying to be the sport kratom company?
So one of the challenges in the kratom space is, of course, is the visibility on what kratom even is, and how do you have, right, at Meta and the various social media platforms, marketing is still a challenge to do it appropriately, to do it honestly, to do it ethically, which makes it hard to get new people interested in the brand. That makes it challenging. And so when we presented with the opportunity to sponsor bare knuckle fighting, um, it made sense with this emerging counterculture type of environment, right? Seeing the success of the UFC and saying, okay, you have this more aggressive kind of on the fray fighting championship. Let's give it a shot for a while. Let's see how it works. Let's see if we can gain some brand awareness. And I'll say, Lawrence, from where we sat, it didn't produce the ROI that we hoped for. So I want to make sure I'm really big on not taking credit for things where it's not due.
Mm-hmm.
I think incredibly highly of the BKFC and their ownership and their entire team. We are currently not actively sponsoring the BKFC. We might still, they might still be using our name or image or likeliness somewhere. Is it's going to be in old publications, but want to make sure that I'm saying it. We tried it. It was great. It's industry people on the inside said, holy cow, right? You're sponsoring these things. You guys are taking a big step in a big direction. We just didn't see it really move the needle yet for consumer adoption. And so to me, that's part of marketing. That's part of branding, is you gotta try different things at different times, see what works, see what maybe doesn't work, allocate budget the right way so it doesn't capsize your business, and not be too proud to say, that one didn't work, right? I made a bunch of decisions inside of our company, Lawrence, that just, quite frankly, they didn't work. If I had a time machine and go back, I would have done them differently, but I don't. So we just learn from them and keep going forward.
Well, let's say you get a time machine for one of them, single-use time machine. What one would you target?
Single-use time machine. Well, Lawrence, there are two specific instances that it's really it'd be one moment in time.
Okay.
We wanted to launch a gummy-based product. And in wanting to launch a gummy-based product, I was very specific that when we say a product has 10 milligrams of active alkaloid in it, that when it comes off the production line, it has to have 10 milligrams of active alkaloid. It can't have 9, it can't have 11, it has to have 10. And the FDA would allow a 20% variance on plant-based matter. So, right, there's a little gray to that. But we had a group of gummies that came out, about $1.5 million worth in cost, not in revenue. And they came out at, if memory serves me correctly, 11.5, or maybe it was 12.5 milligrams per gummy.
Huh.
And thought, okay, it's still very safe, right? It's still a very low entry point when you look at normal consumption. But yet that's not what our packaging says. That's not what our product's intended to have. And so we decided to scrap and throw away all of those gummies, because
Are they in a landfill somewhere, like just sitting there, and we can all go get them, or what?
So regretfully not. This is about 1.5 years ago. There are very specific guidelines on how you dispose of consumable products that go through a series of steps to ensure the fact that someone couldn't do that. And in that same moment in time, Lawrence, we then produced more gummies, right? Which are, they haven't been the fastest moving product for us. And I understand why, because to me, you walk into a potential counterculture store and people's methodology of consumption is pretty fixed right now to me, right? You look at powders and capsules or extracts are kind of the 2/3 variances of methods of consumption. And gummies are intended for more of a novice consumer. It's more of a convenience store based product, or more of a health and wellness store based product, because people are used to the CBD gummies or any number of different gummies now. And so I think we missed the mark with where we took it to market at. I think we missed the mark with how many we produce. We were a little overzealous of our size and scope and what we thought we could pull off. So in a time machine, I would go back and I would not overproduce gummies and I would ensure that our manufacturing processes didn't necessitate us throwing away more than $1 million worth of product, because those are very expensive, very frustrating lessons to learn, that after they're done, you can't go back and retool $1 million worth of gummies. I mean, they're just sitting there, and would they have been safe for consumption? 100%. But there's a difference between safe for consumption and honoring what's on a label. And those are things not to be taken lightly, especially, and I appreciate the way you approached us as an industry, us as a business in the industry. I think with us being one of the larger brands, I don't know where we sit in the hierarchy, it doesn't much matter, but we're certainly not afraid to be visible. I think it's very important that when you have that sense of visibility, that you're consistently focusing a lot of energy, effort, and attention onto doing the right thing. And I air quote it, because what's the right thing even mean? Well, there's certainly FDA guidelines that mean the right thing. There's manufacturing guidelines that mean the right thing, but there's also just being a good person. Like our new packaging, these bottles, right? I'll keep harping on them. The QR code on the back, you're going to be able to scan that QR code.
Good.
The QR code, you're going to be able to see the specific certificate of analysis for not only that product and that specific lot, but every individual component's certificate of analysis that went into that lot. You're also going to be able to see a 24/7, 365 real-time video feed into our manufacturing facility. You're also going to see an executive summary on everybody that's manufacturing the product. That's part of our executive leadership team. You're also going to see any number of internal audits and safety inspections that we've went through. I think that consumers deserve to have eyes wide open transparency into what they're consuming if they feel so inclined to. And I don't think every person is going to scan a QR code. But if you feel compelled to, I want you to be able to do that and say, wow, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm buying. I know where all this stuff comes from.
So let's say I'm a new vendor. If you were a small vendor, how would you compete with MIT45? That's a frustration I hear lots of smaller vendors have, is that they're just getting pushed out. So how do you distinguish yourself in the kratom industry when, okay, you've got strains and you've got different methodologies of consumption, as you said, Ryan, but how do you do it now if you're entering this late in the game?
So that is the legitimate $1 million question at this point, and maybe multi-million-dollar question. I don't know how I would approach it. That's such an interesting question. So as I look at it, I think there's an acknowledgement right now that in the powder and capsule world, very rapidly things are becoming a commodity. And we can talk about the 27 different strands that are presented inside of any store. But you go to Indonesia or Thailand, there are 3 strands. It is white, green, and red. Like these unicorn horn and elephant tusk, and like it's great marketing. But the physical product is probably not dissimilar. And so I know I wouldn't start with the powders and capsule space personally. I think from a regulatory standpoint, right, the FDA has shared, they've done some great research on powders and capsules, right? Actually, Super Speciosa's product. Ken and the guys there were very kind to give the group from University of Florida access to their powders and capsules, which they didn't know the FDA was testing, but they were. And they found no adverse effects to be stated between 2 grams and 12 grams of consumption in a single ascending dose study, which is very beneficial. So on one side, powders and caps kind of have not a green light from the FDA, but right, the FDA has it feels like a moniker of understanding on what those products do. And so then as I look and say, well, on one side, you're going to have a tough road to hoe because there's very little product differentiation. It takes a lot of shelf space. It's really turning into a commodity. On the other side, it's a very stable market because of, again, what I just made mention, potential with the FDA. So I think I would look into the extract side of things. I think one of the challenges on the extract side of things, people have such a lack of understanding on how the extracts really still work. Again, we've been a part of studies and research that would show that the primary mechanism of digestion on kratom is the CYP450 digestive enzyme. And that CYP450 enzyme, I'd start to do research on what are all the other materials that require a lot of CYP450 to digest it. Because kratom has a very high molecular weight from a structure. And so it has a larger bonding affinity to the CYP450. And why that becomes important is you take something, again, like a turmeric or a curcumin or even apple cider vinegar, of all things, also requires CYP 450 to digest it. Why that ends up mattering is if you were to add trace elements of kratom to those products, you could make a more digestible, more bioavailable version of a curcumin, of a turmeric, of a apple cider vinegar by combining it with very small amounts of kratom. So I don't know that I would get directly into the kratom space in its current form and function. I think that we're starting to see the backside of the early adopter curve. If you're familiar with kind of the economic growth curves that exist, I think you look at the smoke shop space. The smoke shop space currently, it's not growing at a new storefront opening at the same pace in which inflation is rising, right? So we would say that, to me, that's kind of a steady state. And so you walk into the average the average smoke shop, to me, and they're very familiar with what kratom is, right? People are coming in and asking for it, and whether they're asking for our brand or a competitor's brand, it doesn't matter. It's established. So I think if I was to do it again, and it's actually some of the things we're working on now, I mean, no, not bashful to share it, are some of these things that I'm sharing. It's saying, what happens when kratom isn't the product? What happens when kratom is a component of a larger product that is intended for optimal health and wellness? So augmenting or enhancing reality versus escaping it. That's where I would focus. It's going to be a longer road. It's going to be a little more challenging, but I think it's going to be more lucrative at the end of the day. I think it's going to be more sustainable. I mean, it's really tough, Lawrence. I mean, you think of, again, I don't want to, who knows who the biggest in the space are. I think you can make an argument that OPMS obviously has a very large footprint. I think you'd make an argument that MIT45 has a large footprint. I think you'd make an argument that Hush has a large footprint, right? There's a series of brands. When you walk in the average smoke shop, where we have shelf placement, right? Feel Free, Botanic Tonics, obviously that's a little bit different feel across the board for where that sits in the marketplace. But I don't know that you're going to come in and magically unseat that, because, right, you probably don't have the buying power that we have. And if you do, you don't have the established brand that we do, right? But we've been doing this since 2018 with our, with MIT45, the gold shot. I think it's really tough. It's like saying, if you were to create a new soda product, how would you unseat, or how do you compete with Pepsi, or how do you compete with Coca-Cola? I don't know that you do right away. I think what happened is you had a new category that emerged with the energy drinks that then eventually got acquired by Pepsi and Coke. So I think people would have to start thinking tangentially to our space to compete versus to jump in just to make another kratom product with a different alkaloid profile and drop price. I don't think that does anything.
So make yourself attractive to the Borg, the kratom Borg. I see.
I think so.
Okay. What's the future for your company aside from the packaging, projects you're working on, challenges you're facing now? Any advocacy you want to talk about?
Yeah, across the board. So some projects we're really excited about are some of the ones I've just been making mention of, right? Obviously, pursuing the DNA assessments and how that can provide value. It'd be providing value in new markets. We're in the process of a series of international expansions that'll take us outside of the US, which is very exciting for us. We've got some really great placement that's coming online inside of 80+% of the airports across the country are going to start carrying our product at a retailer. So that's exciting. We're also focused on, again, some of that tangential growth ourselves, where I think the healthcare practitioner space is a very underserved space overall, with products that are specifically designed to help, chiropractors and perhaps dentists and podiatrists, people that are serving individuals that have their own levels of, we'll call it discomfort, or some things that they would like to have access to that perhaps wouldn't be an opioid based product. I think there's an opportunity in that market. I think there's a big market, right? We were fortunate to acquire or partner in with a company called Uprising for the health and wellness side of things, where we've been very, very bullish on what that looks like for, the supplement type of store and retailer, kind of the fray there. Lawrence, and then on the advocacy side of things, I mean, the advocacy landscape is just so interesting right now across the board, right? With so many passionate people focusing on so many things. What we would love to see happen is all the advocacy groups come together and really push the same story forward. Because I think what ends up happening over a long enough period of time, the average legislator doesn't have a clear understanding on why they're being presented with two different versions of bills. They don't have a clear understanding on who does what and why they do it. And I think the more unified we are, the further we get. We as a company have been working with McGuire Woods, one of the larger lobbying firms in the nation, to help behind the scenes champion through advocacy for the KCPA. I think the KCPA overall, the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, I think we need to take a hard look at how that's designed. Is it scalable? Is it sustainable? How again do we define Kratom in the KCPA? Because if you try to make the KCPA everything for everybody, it's going to be really challenging too. I think for me, it's a lot of the advocacy, it gets around things like that. It's saying, like, how do we advocate for responsible consumption? How do we not go toe to toe with the FDA and work hand in hand with the FDA? Because at the end of the day, if you want to protect people and you want to do the right thing by them, the game of business is pretty fun. The FDA isn't the boogeyman in the corner to me. They have an incredibly challenging job. I think for some of the things I'm really excited about, Lawrence, I would love for us to figure out how to be the first publicly traded Kratom company at some point. I think that we've been professionalizing ourselves over the past 4 or 5 years with, unqualified PCAOB audits and, really focusing on what it takes to take a company to the next level. It's something I'm incredibly proud of. That's really why I was brought in to MIT45, was to help professionalize it across the board. It's, I had a little bit of experience in selling a company or two before, or being a part of a handful of transactions. And so I think that can be an exciting thing for what that might look like whenever that day presents itself. We're also simultaneously want to ensure that our coworkers that help build our company get the upside of that as well. So, the team that supports us, our coworkers, right? They reap the benefit of whether it's an employee stock option pool or shares that vest a change of control. I think that's a really exciting thing for us. I could go on and on about the possibilities in the future. What I do know is we've got a very aggressive 5-year growth plan that it's been our experience. It'll be my experience for anybody that watches this. When you can really sit down and clear out some space and take the filter off your life of what you want to achieve in 5 to 10 years, and you don't worry about the how. Like the how, Lawrence, there's nothing I could have done to figure out 6 months ago how I would have ended up here right now with you in this moment. It doesn't matter how brilliant I could have been. There's no way. But sometimes I find that we beat ourselves up by not knowing exactly how we're going to achieve our 5 or 10-year goals. Where when you get really clear on those, and you can speak them very clearly, and it connects with people. It's been our experience as a company that the right people come into your life, the right opportunities come into your life, right? Whether it's a reticular activating system or your amygdala or whatever it is, it's showing you things that have already been there. They've always been there. Or whether these things are magically through divinity being brought into your ethos. I think that's a big thing for our industry, and for whether you're a Kratom consumer or another business that's watching this. Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? Like you get to paint with a pretty crazy paintbrush, right? How big do you want to be? What type of impact do you want to make in the world? And then just keep owning that, keep honoring that, right? We didn't set out to be the biggest Kratom company. I don't know that we are. I'm not professing that at all. What we did set out to be is be the best. And then it's like, well, how do you even define the best? So we defined the best with a series of metrics internally. It didn't matter what the world thought the best was. My partners and I said, this is what the best means to us. It's offering, incredible healthcare benefits to all of our employees at no cost to them. It's making sure they're fed and they have things that way. It's paying top of market wages. It's making sure that if there's a change of control, they get an upside. It's being world-class in our manufacturing facility, and that it's really pushing our new facility that we're moving into. It's actually it's right on the precipice. I'll call it ISO 6 compliant. But I can make an argument that we could bring it down to ISO 5. So our new products will be manufactured in a pharmaceutical grade compliant facility. They're not pharmaceutical products. I need to make sure that I say that, but the way the facility is physically built out and structured would be that of one that is incredibly compliant with levels way above supplement manufacturing. All these things were things that if I were to show you our first working documents from 4 years ago, 2020, I brought during COVID, my partners and I had our first offsite where we got really clear on what we wanted to co-create together. And it's the craziest thing to look back at that sheet of paper, Lawrence. 95% of it's already done. Now, there was no way we sat there at that point. Gosh, Lawrence, we might have been I think we had just crossed maybe 10 million in revenue, which is still an incredibly large company. But I look backwards now, and we have months of revenue that are larger than that. And it's saying, man, how in the world could we have ever got to this moment in time? There was no way to say 1 + 1 + 1 was going to equal 3 at that moment. It was, I don't even know how to count to 3. But yet here we sit getting to experience a lot of that. And not to be too metaphysical, but I think that the more time we focus on why we're doing what we're doing, the bigger impact we can make. And I think at some point that's hopefully why all of us are doing what we're doing, right? To make an impact, to leave a positive impression in the world, not just to make a bunch of money. And right, I'm not saying that we're making a bunch of money either. I just think that sometimes the entrepreneurial journey is one of just, I need to make a bunch of money. And it's beneficial to have disposable income, but it is not the end all to be all.
For sure. And to that point, if you affirm something to yourself with good enough conviction, it will happen. That's partially how my podcast got started, even though it's not big yet. I wouldn't have been able to do it if I hadn't believed it. You'll see it when you believe it. So I'm a firm believer in that. And I don't think it's even that metaphysical to believe.
We operate the same way, Lawrence. That's how our entire business is structured, is through that level of, we call it attention and alignment, right? Are we in intention, and are we in alignment with that intention? And when those answers are yes, things seem to just magically happen. And so we're always knocking ourselves back into alignment with the intention that we set. Because the world gets crazy. There's a million things that go on that want to pull you just off of that path. So I really value what you just shared.
Thanks. And finally, one book or piece of media that really transformed the way you view the world.
So there is a book by Claire Graves and Don Beck that is Spiral Dynamics in Action. And spiral dynamics is a psychological construct that gets into not only how do we process information as human beings, but how do groups of people process information, how do city-states and nations process information. And it was the first awareness I had that we have, again, maybe it's real, maybe it's not, but somewhere between 8 and 9 different levels of self inside of ourselves. And as someone gets really mad or frustrated, right, we all have a version of that inside of ourselves. And when we're challenged emotionally, the person that reverts to that isn't bad or good. They're just operating this, what's referred to as red level 3. It's a power God level. It's, man, I need to stamp my fist and slam my hand down, and this is the way it's going to be. And that's beautiful, because we all have that. We all need that inside of us. But then there's some people that, man, when chaos ensues, they get very orderly. They start creating structure. They're cleaning up their desks. They're trying to figure out the process to do things. Those end up being blue level 4 type of people. And there's this whole construct, Lawrence, that gets into how that might work, right? Who knows? It could all be nonsense. But it was one of those things that when I saw that, I started realizing, man, people are just doing the best they can with what they have. We're all just trying to figure it out. And none of us probably do. And so it allowed for, when I'm in that space, a lot of humility, a lot of gratitude, and a decent amount of empathy for what people are going through, right? Because if you've never been exposed to these as being possibilities of conversation, well, then how would you be able to navigate up and around and through the different levels, right? If it's even one that serves you. So Spiral Dynamics in Action by Claire Graves and Don Beck would have been a book that would have came out perhaps late 70s, early 80s. His work has been progressed through by a guy named Ken Wilber, who has a theory of everything. He's got something called All Quadrants, All Levels. I'm a big psychology fan of just studying how human beings operate and think, and really it's from a self-discovery sense, right, Lawrence? I mean, we could have a whole nother show on all the things I've messed up in my life and less than favorable decisions, and maybe why I made them and the stories I tell myself. So it's just a beautiful journey of self-exploration.
There you have it, Ryan Niddel, the philosopher, and Ryan Niddel, the entrepreneur. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being on our show. It was a fascinating conversation. I'm sure the viewers will love it, with or without the blur. I recommend downloading the audio version of this one, guys, though. That's really the full experience. But Ryan, thank you so much. It was thrilling having you on again, and we'll talk again sometime.
Great, Lawrence. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.